second. There we go. Okay. So when you are submitting your assignment, if you haven't submitted, like, say, an art project or anything like that on Blackboard before, very simply, you go to Course Content. Here's our projects, right, 1 through 5. You go over to Project 1. That's the one we're currently working on, of course. This project specification, the kind of breakdown on everything here, got the rubric at the bottom. This is the actual file that you'll be submitting into. You just open the file, Project 1 two-tone. You would do this for any of our assignments. And then you scroll on down. Again, here's the whole project specification telling you how to do a screenshot, telling you how to do basically everything for the assignment. And you scroll down, and right there, you have your submission area, right? So right here, you would just click Browse Local Files. You would upload that particular file. And then down here on the bottom right-hand corner, you would click Submit. And that's it. That would be your submission. I only ask that you turn in the final actual image. Please don't have your screenshot still in the image if you're painting or tracing on top of it, which is fine for this project. I don't want to see the photograph as well. I only want to see what you've actually painted. That's specific because sometimes, especially if you're painting a black and white photograph, if you've desaturated your image, sometimes it's hard for me as the teacher to kind of see what you have painted and what you haven't painted. So make sure before you are done that you kill off that, that background layer. And hopefully you guys have been painting on separate layers. And then, yeah, just submit that particular image. A JPEG is just fine. It's our very first project. I don't expect, you know, photorealism. In fact, you shouldn't have photorealism. You should have simplified this down to its bare essentials. For our next project, just as a heads up here, we'll get into this next week, of course. But for our next project, after you've submitted this one on Friday, this coming Friday, then we're going to go ahead as a class and jump into Project 2. Now, because you can work ahead of schedule, you may already be on Project 2. And for you guys who are working ahead of schedule, by all means, I commend you and I say go for it. But for Project 2, we're going to get into more freehand drawing. Okay, so we will no longer be tracing. We're going to do the exact same process of working with black and white shapes, then adding in that third value. Only this time we're going to add in even more values. And again, I've got a pre-recorded demo here. I've actually got 2 different pre-recorded demos. Right, you can kind of see them all right in here. Okay, so this demo right here is a really good start to finish one. This one down here with Leon. From the professional, this was one we did, or I had done previously in class. This was one I did at home while we were, you know, COVID lockdown style. So this is a really good one to follow, especially if you're using Photoshop. If you're using GIMP, again, some of it translates, some of it does not translate, but the idea is still very, very much the same. You'll see in this demonstration how I start off with these hard black shapes. I go ahead and add in my highlights, and then I kind of massage it out using this mid-tone, this mid-gray value. Then from there, I go back and I add in 2 more values. And again, we'll talk much more about this next class. And after I've added in those extra values, then I make a new layer, and that's where we get into adding color. So this picture is not only going to be a freehand drawing, but it's also going to go through the steps of adding in those 3 values that we're learning about now. And then you're going to add color. The way you're going to add color for the second project, the one we're going to get to next week, is you're actually going to be staining or kind of adding a glaze over top of your grayscale picture. So you won't actually be painting with color. We'll kind of be staining our picture. So once it's in black and white, then we'll go back and add color to it. No surprise, when we get to our third painting, which is still weeks away, when we get to our third painting, that's where we'll start just painting in color right from the get-go. Okay, so you can kind of see the steps we're going through. Starting here with our first project, just doing those kind of straight forward black, white, and gray shapes, right? Very minimal. Then we're getting black, white, gray shapes with a stain of color as well as some more values, right? Kind of a dark gray and a light gray. And then finally, project 3, we get into painting just right out of the get-go, no grayscale, just jumping right into color. Once we've finished up with that, at that point, you should feel pretty dang comfortable painting digitally. I'm not going to say that you're a master by any means, but you should feel very comfortable in the process. And then it's just going to come simply down to practicing. After that, and this is about midterms, after that we'll switch gears, we'll get into more illustration using Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape, and then finally we'll get into our big finale, of course. And our final, no surprise, will involve everything you've learned throughout this entire class. But again, now you know how to submit your project. So if you're working ahead of schedule, by all means, please submit your stuff ahead of time. I'm always happy to grade your projects ahead of time. One quick note for you guys who are hanging out and or you guys who are watching this later. You do not get attendance by showing up to our live lessons. You do get attendance by posting to the discussion board. So again, I just clicked on discussions. I opened up this particular thread. It's the only forum that's available. I've got week 1, week 2, and I can see some of you guys had already posted for week 3, which is perfect. We are in week 3, but you definitely want to get that attendance points. Those will help you out down the line. Let's say if you've been in a situation before where you're working on a project and you just need an extra 2 points maybe to push you over the edge for a grade, that's where your attendance comes in. Those extra couple of points here and there can really tip a grade in the right direction. And if you're not posting, that does 2 things. 1, you're missing out on basically free points. But then 2, also, you are doing yourself a disservice because I'm not able to talk about or critique your artwork, whether in the discussion board or like we're going to do today, where I've pulled up the images that were posted so that we can kind of talk about those ones. Normally in this class, I will spend kind of the second week. So the first week I'll introduce the project. The second week going through giving you some finite details and critiquing what you guys have posted previously. So again, just for those of you guys who haven't, please make sure that you are posting to the discussion board. It is for your service, not for mine. I'd be more than happy if nobody posts because it makes my life a lot easier. But get what you're paying for, right? So if you want that good, solid critique, if you want help along the way to get a better grade and therefore also get more knowledge, which is really the point of being here, not getting a grade, but getting knowledge. If that's what you want, then use that discussion board. That's going to help you out. All right, so enough berating you guys. I don't need to do that anymore. So we're going to do 2 things here. I'm going to do a couple quick little notes from the 2 pictures that were submitted to week 2. So we'll talk about those real quick. If you submitted them, we'll keep it anonymous. I like to keep things kind of anonymous in our critiques so that we can kind of talk openly. And then I'm going to go ahead and jump on into using a new application that I've been playing around with because GIMP recently has not really worked for me. They just, about a year ago, they updated to 2.1 or 2.10. And I'm not a big fan. It's a really it's a little bit clunkier than I like. It's great for Photoshop, not really great for digital painting. So I'm switching gears. I'm going to be using a program called Krita. You might have heard it before. You might already have it. But I'm going to be using Krita for today's lesson. So just jumping in here real quick. Again, I've got my screen cap on so you guys can see. If you do want to chat, I'll go ahead and just do this real quick. I'm going to manipulate my screen just so that I can still see the chat room as well. And again, you guys are obviously more than welcome to turn on your microphones as well. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Sometimes I get tired of hearing myself talk. So please, by all means, you can add in the chat room, or you can also obviously turn in. Okay. So again, keeping things anonymous. So here we've got a scene from Inception. And I can tell very quickly we've got the good silhouette here of Leonardo, right? I got a really good, clean cutout. Sometimes something that helps is if you kind of squint your eyes, or if you legitimately have like glasses or contacts, like just take them off so that your vision's a little bit blurred. And that really kind of helps you see where the edges are. And when you're painting, you really want to make sure to watch out for kind of getting too linear, and I'm saying linear using the word lines, right? Even though, yes, there are definitely highlights here, you still want to try your best to paint them as a shape. So like the edge of this post right here, I'm going to pick on. So here, there's obviously the brightest highlight on the edge, but I can also tell that right about here, right about here, I can just turn that into a shape, right? Just turn that into kind of maybe a rectangle or like almost like a blocky number 9 looking shape. That would work fine. So try to keep things shape-based and not line-based. Now, obviously, if you're just kind of throwing down a couple quick colors or quick values just to get things on the canvas, that's fine. I don't mean to pick on a quick kind of rundown here. But definitely keep things blockier, keep things more shape-based. because as you're kind of squinting your eyes or as you're taking off your glasses, you'll notice that these little lines start to kind of just blend and fade away a little bit, whereas like the stairs, for example, or obviously the big background and the floor, those remain. They become these big, almost like piano keys, really big blocks. That's where you want to be. So think silhouettes, think outlines, and think crisp edges too. You want to watch out for kind of a fuzzier brush when you're painting. I would always insist that whenever you start a painting, you start with a hard-edged brush. You will eventually form that into a soft edge brush where you're trying to blend things out. That will get there for sure. But for now, super hard-edged brush. Keep it as you know. I actually like to paint with a square brush sometimes. That helps me as well, because then I can get a really clean, crisp edge. I showed you some examples here previously in our course content from a different artist, but I really think it's still worth noting, just for a second here. You can keep things extra scribbly. That's okay. They don't have to be clean. But you can see here again, you know, these examples, right? I can tell, like, this is a good example. There is no detail here telling me that there's actually a building, right? But your brain fills in that detail and says, oh, well, there's an archway here, and this must be the cast shadow underneath. Our brains are really good at decoding positive and negative shapes. If you've had class with me before, especially if you've had a painting class with me, we've talked about how our eyes work. And inside of our eyes, we have rods and we have cones. Now, cones inside of your eye are dedicated, singularly dedicated to color. But the rods in your eyes are dedicated to seeing contrast, so value, light and dark, and they're also dedicated to seeing movement. So if magically I could pull all of the rods out of your eyes, the world would look very different. First off, you would have no way of perceiving movement, so I don't know how you'd walk around. But you also you'd see color, but you wouldn't see the intensity of color. It would just be a big blob, right? Vice versa, people who are, say, colorblind, who are 100% colorblind, they only see in black and white or grayscale. That means that their cones are turned off, but their rods are still working. So it's really the rods inside of your eyes that are doing most of the heavy lifting. That's what allows us to navigate our world. The cones just add a little bit of kind of extra icing on the cake. They let us see color. But really, when you are learning to paint, I want you to try to imagine to paint without color, and then we'll slowly introduce it as we go along. But you really want to think just high contrast. Hard edges, right? Really crisp, clean, kind of hard edges there. And just as you are kind of navigating, as you're moving along, don't worry about trying to outline things. Look at how this samurai guy, his hair just blends into the shadow, and yet you know he's got hair. You just know it's there, right? This guy's hair here kind of morphs into his shadow behind him, and yet you know that he doesn't have a giant ponytail. Your brain kind of magically draws a line there because it knows what it's supposed to be. Trust your subconscious, trust your brain, and just fill these things in very solid, big shapes, okay? Okay. So I don't want to ramble too much. Does that, over in the chat room, does that make sense, guys, what we're kind of talking about here, big shapes and everything? Does that work for you? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Like I said, I don't want to ramble too much. I want to make sure that we're making a positive movement in the right direction here every time we meet in class. I want to make it a valuable experience for you. So again, good direction so far here with the scene, but just kind of clean it up. Obviously, you know, this is still kind of early on. I'm sure that this artist has moved on and they're drawing a little bit, and that's perfect. The other one that was submitted here is this one, and I actually have an updated version from this particular week here. You can see there's definitely been a lot of movement here. The artist has really been working hard, and I can tell that right away. Look at that big jump right there, right? It's a lot of change, and I think it's working pretty well. I love the body here is perfect. Look at those big hard shapes between like his pecs and his abs, and yet you know what they are, right? They don't get lost or anything. You as the artist are really making a decisive decision here of, okay, this is shadow, this is highlight. So really that evolution, that change as you've grown your design here is working really, really well. Again, putting the highlight on like the claws around kind of his cowl or his neck here, that's a good idea. I don't know necessarily if I would do the line, even though I know that there is a line there. I know there's a string, but look at how like in the shadows here, you don't really see it. So again, it's fighting our brains that we know something is there, but we don't really see it. And if you don't see it, just get rid of it. If it's in shadow, put it in shadow. The only correction I would make, and that goes for both versions here, would be a little bit on the face. I think you're in the right direction. I like that you're kind of adding the highlight here on the side, right? You're adding this shadow across the entire face. I don't even see detail in the nose, even though I know he has a nose, but I can't see it, right? The shadow is just the shadow. So I think you're doing the right thing there. I think the eyes are where you're getting tripped up. I know that he has whites in his eyes. Of course he does, right? However, when you look at the photograph, right? When you look at the photograph, it is your job to decide, okay, are the whites of his eyes bright enough to be equivalent to the background, right? The background is pure white, right? So are the whites of his eyes bright enough to be the exact same value as like these clouds? If you say yes, then clearly you're on the right track and I wouldn't worry about it. If you say no, then I would just gray those out as well and put in like some black dots for like his pupils, maybe a little bit of an overline. So let's take a look at that. I've gone ahead, I've taken this picture and I've just pulled it up in this Krita app. I'm gonna go ahead and just expand that real quick. So Krita is similar to GIMP, it is a totally free software. I'm gonna add a link later today in our announcements. It is a completely free painting app, specifically for painting. And looking back at our class, I have used Photoshop for so many years, and GIMP has always been my default kind of free version of Photoshop. But truth be told, GIMP is not really meant for digital painting. It's meant for Photoshop, but Photoshop and digital painting are kind of two separate things. Or photo manipulation, excuse me. So we're going to go ahead and jump. This is just Krita. You can see I've got my color selection kind of over here. This is kind of the intensity, and then my color wheel itself. But of course, we're just using black and white. I've got my opacity up on the top here. I've got the size of my brush, which I'm actually going to be using my keyboard. The bracket keys over by kind of the enter key. I can click those keys and raise and lower it, especially whenever you're drawing. You definitely want your non-dominant hand, in my case, my left hand. You really want that on the keyboard and learn those hotkeys. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Down here, I've got different brushes that do different things, right? So I can get kind of a flat brush, right? I can get different, oops, there we go, kind of more of a softer brush, kind of build up some intensity. Look at that, I'm pushing harder, pushing softer, right? Okay. I can kind of change my brush around as I see fit. For right now, because we're just starting out, I'm going to stick with this brush where it's just a really solid flat shape, no matter how hard I push. I've got my layers, so I'm going to make a new layer real quick, right there on top, and that way I can turn it off and on, just like in Photoshop. And then coming over yonder, I've got all my tools, and this is, again, the same breakdown as in Photoshop. So I'm just going to do a little palette over here on the side to make my life a lot easier. I've got my pure black, got my pure white, and then if I want, I'm going to grab kind of a 50-50 here. Now you can actually type in your value, but I'm just going to eyeball it a little bit. So there's my gray. So this is going to be my palette. And again, I've got my paintbrush right here. And then what I'm going to be using to jump around a little bit is I've got this here. This is my color selector. And every time I hit the letter P, my mouse magically changes, right? So I can just kind of grab a new account there, or a new color, just like so. And then you can see with the paintbrush, my hotkey is B for brush. So I've got my keys on the bracket keys on the letter P and the letter B. And you can actually map these to, if you have like a Wacom tablet or something, you can actually map these to your pad. But if you ever see like somebody digitally drawing, they might have a little palette over here. And that can even be on a separate layer. But it's just an easy way to kind of grab your colors and keep moving. So, okay. So there's that, and now I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in. I'm going to focus on the face real quick. And again, like I said, if you guys have questions, go ahead and add them in the chat room there. So what I would suggest whenever I'm painting something, and again, if you guys have had class with me before, then you already know I love layers. I use layers probably too much. I have a layer obsession. So for me, what I would do, again, we're starting off with the darkest value possible. So I'm going to grab my black. I'm going to get my brush. I'm going to make my brush nice and small. And look how quick that was, right? If you have hotkeys going on, you can make your life very, very easy. Again, I'm going to come on down here. I'm going to go ahead and take this photograph. Let's notch the opacity down on my photograph just a bit. Oh, that's my brush. Oops. There's my layer opacity. And just like in GIMP, I can go ahead and add in a background layer of white. Let's grab my white. And I'm just going to throw in a little blob right here, just so it's nice and solid. Okay, so just the head right there. Okay, back on it. So grab my black, shrink things down, get on the right layers, just kind of setting up my canvas. So I'm going to do a layer for black, a layer for white, and then a layer for gray. And of course, yes, you are absolutely welcome to do these all on the same layer. You might have used, Photoshop or anything before where you want to blur things. I won't lie, the way I'm going to teach you to paint is to not use the blur tool. That's me personally. I don't like it. I don't find it to be all that useful. However, if you like to use it, plenty of artists do, and you are welcome to do that. But if you are going to be blurring, you want to keep all of your colors, all of your values on the same layer, so that you can kind of smudge them in between each other. But again, I'm not a big fan of smudging. I think that it puts too much control in the hands of the computer. So that's me personally. Something that I'm not doing that I probably should. Whenever you're painting, you want to start with the biggest brush that you feel comfortable to use. So like I started out there with a tiny brush, and there is that temptation. But like even for his eyebrows here, go large and in charge. You can always paint over top of it later on, right? So I'm just kind of throwing this down real quick. And again, I'll clean that up later. I can see he's got the nostrils right there. I'm going to try and connect that nostril to his goatee here. Now I'm painting on top of your drawing, so there's definitely aspects that I am missing in the process. So you'll have to forgive me a little bit that I'm not seeing all of the detail of the original photo. But I wanted to just kind of do a little bit of what's called a paint over. You probably have seen these things if you've hunted around online, just to kind of help us out along the way here. And again, you can see like I'm messing up over here. But again, I want you to not really stress those mess ups, because very quickly you can just clean those back up again, right? So if you go outside the lines or something like that, remember that this is digital. You can paint over everything, right? All right, so next I want to think about the highlights, the actual highlights of the image. And again, I can kind of tell that there was, at least at one time, there's definitely kind of a highlight on this side of his face. So a little bit of a highlight underneath his eyelid here. And again, we talked about the choice of doing the whites of the eyes, which you can absolutely do. Maybe I'll do one over here with the whites and one without, just so we can see the difference. And then there's a little bit of a highlight on this side of his face. I can tell that his lower lip is a little bit brighter than the upper lip. That's pretty normal for humans because of the way our mouths work. The highlight, the sun is above us, and our lower lip tends to stick out, whereas our upper lip tends to go in. So that lower lip is always going to have a little bit of a highlight on it. That's just normal, so we'll add some lightness on that. And then the rest really is going to be kind of that mid-tone. But here's the key. As you are painting, as you're starting, don't use that middle gray right out of the gate. Middle gray is kind of a saving grace. It's going to be the thing that fixes, right? So in this case, if I'm only using pure black and pure white, and those are my only two choices, that means this is going to be a lot darker, right? And I know that's kind of a backwards way of thinking, right? That it makes a lot more sense to just add the middle gray right now, right? Clearly, I'm going to be using it, right? But this project particularly, this first painting, has very little to do with making a perfect painting. It has very little to do with that. This project really specifically is all about the idea of trying to see these values, right? Trying to see these values. So again, I know that the bottom of his lip here is a little bit highlighted, and I'll clean that up in a second. I'm going to go, because I'm only picking black and white, I am going to agree and say that the whites of the eyes are most certainly white, because they're definitely not black, right? They're definitely not in shadow. And again, there's a highlight on this edge of his forehead. And that makes sense too. If you think about the human head, if you can see on your own forehead, you've got kind of your actual forehead starts here at the temples, right? So this is forehead, whereas this is kind of the sides of the head, the temple. Okay. And really, now it's up to me. I have to make that decision, right? I have to make that call. Is it in highlight? Is it in shadow, right? So maybe like the underside here of the nose, I'm going to choose is going to be in highlight because of the way the light is kind of hitting his head. This whole side of his face, we're going to say is highlighted as well. And again, just like with those examples that I posted from the other artist, my friend online there, you have to kind of trust, right? Right now, it is very intimidating. Even for me as your teacher, it's very intimidating for me to just say, okay, well, now I'm just going to start throwing on some big old heavy shadows, right? That's really scary because I don't want to mess it up any more than you guys do. But you got to trust the process a little bit. Don't be afraid to just jump on in with some big old heavy shadows. Because what's going to end up happening is, again, we're training your eye to see where those positive and negative shapes are. It also will help your picture be less mundane. If you've been an artist for a while, if you've been drawing for a while, you might find that sometimes your pictures tend to look a little bit middle of the road. They kind of are a little basic. They're kind of a little like, well, you know, it's good enough, but it's not great, you know. That usually has a lot to do with not having enough contrast, right? Not having enough contrast. Do not be afraid to just push that contrast to a ridiculous level. Really amp it up because, again, it's digital, right? You can't really mess up as long as you're willing to just kind of jump in with both feet, right? And again, like I said, the more you do it, the more you learn to trust. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger just to fill in his full forehead here, right? And just trust that process. And it feels goofy. It feels like it should not work. All logic in your brain is saying, nope, Kozak is a crazy person. He's gone. He's off the reservation. Ship him off. But I'm telling you, just trust that your brain will know what the heck it's supposed to do. And again, I personally find it's even easier, even though it feels like it shouldn't be. I find that it's even easier whenever you're not working, not tracing off of something. I like to start this class with tracing because I think a lot of students who maybe have never used digital painting before, it might be intimidating, right? It might be a little intimidating to just jump right in. If you haven't had a drawing class in a long time and now all of a sudden you're doing digital painting, it can be definitely an intimidating process. So that's why we start with tracing. I'm not going to lie to you, me personally, I don't like tracing. And not because I'm some hobnob, snooty person who's, oh, I'm better than tracing. It's not like that. I find it kind of, I find it kind of constricting in that I kind of know what I'm supposed to do. Like I know what the finished product looks like. Whereas if I am drawing from kind of a photographic reference, but I'm not necessarily tracing it, then I can kind of say, oh, you know what? In my drawing, or I can make an executive decision. In my drawing, I'm going to grab some white here. I think that there needs to be a highlight right here on his chin, right? Maybe to show kind of where that beard is right there, right? Now, is there in real life? No, there's not, right? But I can make that alteration because at the end of the day, it's still my drawing. I'm still the artist. I'm still the one making the call. And I think that's going to help kind of push my picture, right? So again, even right here, let's switch that out. This should probably be highlighted as well. And look at how, I mean, he's in there. You know, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not pretending like it's perfect, but it's in there, you know? Trust that process. For this particular artist, the student who submitted this so far, you kind of did it with your clouds, actually. I was looking at your previous picture there that you just sent this week. The painting that you did of your clouds, you kind of trust that like those clouds will just appear. And again, sometimes whenever it's not the focal point of your painting, sometimes it's a little bit easier to just kind of to not be afraid to mess it up because, oh, they're just dumb clouds and they can't be, you know, I can't mess them up. They're just dumb clouds. But the face I can mess up. And I don't want you to think that way. I want you to just kind of jump in. You know, if you mess something up, who cares, right? I'm going to put a little bit more shadow right along his hairline, or a little bit more highlight, excuse me, right along that hairline. Let's switch that out real quick. And again, it's still a shape, but that little hook might kind of break that space up a little bit. Right? So right there, I kind of messed up on that eyeball, but I'm not going to worry about it. Right there, that's where we want to be sitting for stage one. Right? Stage one, I have placed my heavy shadows and my heavy highlights, and it's working. Right? Now, and again, I'm a fan of layers. You don't have to be. Don't follow down my dark path here. I'm going to go ahead and grab the gray. Now, you're going to see as I'm painting that I am still jumping between gray, black, and white. Just because I grabbed gray doesn't mean that I'm no longer using black and white. I am absolutely going to be messing things up along the way. Look, that eye is still broken. I need to fix that. Ooh, look at that. That's not good. Going the wrong direction, the whole wrong direction on that eyeball. The other one's pretty good, though. I'm okay with the other one. All right, so here we go. Now, your gray is not meant to be a color or a value in the sense I'm not supposed to just start scribbling down gray, right? Instead, your gray is softening that edge between your white and your black shape. So if you say to yourself, okay, you know what, this where the white and the black meet, it's a little bit too heavy. I need to kind of soften that a little bit, right? Let's do this instead. Leave his hairline. And again, think shapes as best that you possibly can. Think in shapes, right? Anywhere that I see this kind of connection, try to bring those shapes together. I'm going to leave this kind of heavier shadow right here. I think that works. Come down to like the ridge of his nose, where that black and the white kind of connect. Okay. Again, let's take a peek here. Maybe like a little right here where the white connects. Maybe his lip is not as in shadow. Something like that. Where the white meets the black, and that's really all I'm thinking about. I'm trying my best to ignore the painting at this point, which is hard. Again, it's hard for me too. Trying my best to ignore the painting and just see where does white and black connect, and does that need to be pushed darker? Does that need to be pushed lighter? And I can't really see this cheekbone. I feel like because I kind of made up this highlight, I feel like I should kind of extend that highlight around, give it more of a cheek kind of shape. Right? Let's extend this jawline up to that cheek shape here. Soften that out. Anywhere that the white touches the black, unless you are purposefully choosing a really hard edge, which you can do, but unless you're purposefully choosing a really hard edge, I would highly suggest you throw some kind of gray down there to soften it. Okay. Again, for my case, right, I've got a highlight right here on the forehead, and I've got a shadow right here in his hair. I want that hard edge to be there because that juxtaposition is what I'm going for, right? Right here, however, even though I know the background is really white, I also know his ear is kind of there. So I'm just going to kind of color this in a little bit. And I'm coloring in kind of the background area because I want to really push that cheek. I think his cheek should be really popping out there. So I'm just pushing these values in left or right, darker or lighter. And again, same here. I want that edge of his hair to be nice and dark, and I want that forehead to be nice and bright. Kind of get under that eye. Let's see if we can fix that eye while we're here. Okay, all right, it's in there, it's in there. A little bit of shadow underneath. I probably should get a smaller brush or play with this a little more. Let's go ahead and switch back. Now, this is where I'm going to start jumping back and forth a little bit. I'll get a little bit smaller brush. And this is where I can start kind of massaging in. Can't really see. I know he's got a brow right here, the brow ridge line. Kind of get that in, just kind of break that apart a little bit. Oops. He's got that eyebrow right in there. It's a pretty small brush. Let's go a little bit bigger. Good, strong, powerful kind of eyebrow shape. You can see his eyes right about here. And then you can see there's a little bit of shadow on this side of the eye as well. So let's kind of build that back in. Eye connects. Smaller brush. A little bit of shadow on that side. That's pretty big. I think I might have lost it, maybe pushed it a little bit too much. Yeah, and just kind of play back and forth to get to where you want to be. Yeah. So notice in my case, the way I'm going to play up on this a little bit here, that eye is off. Wow. Wow, that's off. Let's try this instead. I'm going to make a new layer. Woo, what was I doing? Again, still trying to think in shapes. That looks pretty good. Let's see what that does there. Okay, cleans it up a little bit. And, you know, I mean, honestly, I give you guys time to work on this because it doesn't happen overnight, right? This is definitely something that will be, that you'll kind of be, I use the word massage all the time, but you're going to be kind of like pushing and pulling and adjusting and getting it so that it's just where you want it to be. And you should. It should not just be something that magically just, you know, clicks or works. You're going to have to kind of work at it a little bit and get it where you want it to be. But eventually, you know, eventually you get there. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that eye. And again, notice how like the whites of his eyes are that gray value, but over here, because there's more highlight, I'm going to leave that as kind of a white shape, right? So again, you just kind of keep on coloring this in, and I don't want to hold you guys the entire time that I'm coloring. Do try to use a bigger brush than you feel comfortable with. I keep getting too small. I need to go a little bit larger. But I can let this black line, where my mouse is at, I can let this black line kind of be symbolic of the bridge of his nose, right? And everything will start to kind of fall into place a little bit, right? I want to grab kind of his beard again, make a new layer, get that detail on there. Make sure that it's in the right place. Let's try that on for size. Again, like I said, if it's a little scratchy looking, little you know, not perfect, that's kind of okay. I'm not too worried about perfection. Just enough that kind of the main heart of the actual picture is in there, if that makes any sense. I like that white line there. I think that's a nice little touch. I'm going to pull that out just a little bit more. Let's see, something like that maybe. Do just a little more of a highlight. Maybe there's a hint of a glare right in here. You know, play with your values a little bit. Because eventually, as you're painting, eventually this switches, and you'll feel it in your brain. It switches from you tracing to you just making the painting yourself, to it just being your painting, right? If you know how to do, if you've had a drawing class, if you know how to do hatching, cross-hatching, anything like that, feel free to break your lines up a little bit with those little hatch marks. Little tiny dashes here and there can really kind of soften an edge. You know, for example, if I want to make that a little bit softer, just by breaking that line, making it a little bit rougher, that eyebrow's in there. And again, you can see I kind of started with that large brush, but slowly right in, and again, I'm working around the eye and the nose right now, but it's starting to get in there. Right? It's starting to get that sense of life that we're going for. Little bits of detail here and there, and I'm only using 3 values, right? I'm using 3 colors here, black, white, and gray. It doesn't leave a lot of room for wiggling, but eventually, when we get to next week, right, eventually we'll start introducing kind of a combo over here. Eventually we're going to start getting into, okay, how do I add a darker gray? How do I add a lighter gray? And it's those colors as we get into, let's see here, kind of a darker value right in there. And this is all kind of next week stuff, but that darker value and, oops, slide on down here. Get up there. This lighter value. Right now, I can start going back into this drawing and kind of pumping in these lighter values and these darker values, right? But for now, again, you can see you can still get a good sense of detail in the face, or in your character. You can still get a good sense of detail, but start with the big, heavy black and white shapes first, and then kind of spill into your gray value. Don't work them simultaneously. Do not start with that gray value and then add black or white to it. It just is not going to work for you. I promise it's not going to end up the way you want it to. So, okay, I will stop rambling. How do you guys feel? Talk to me in the chat room, raise your hand. Do you have questions about this drawing or about anything that we've done so far? Do you have questions? Yeah. Kayla, go for it.
Okay, so my question is basically just about the order of how we should do it.
Okay.
Just like from what you just said. So you want us to start off with black and then add in the white and then add in the grayscale?
Yeah, so truth be told, you could start with white and then add black. You could start with black and then add white. That really doesn't matter which one comes first. Me personally, just my brain, it helps me kind of almost like adding outlines. It helps me see those big, heavy shadows if I start with black. That's just me. If you find for yourself that you prefer laying down the highlights and then adding black later, by all means, go ahead. There is not a perfect one way to do this, But yeah, you purely 100% make your entire picture with just black and white. Then kind of soften that transition with those grays. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. That was a great question. Thank you for that. Absolutely. What other questions, concerns? Do you guys have questions about your picture? If you do, you're welcome to share your screen and we can kind of talk about it a little bit. I want to make sure that you leave today knowing exactly what is due, because this project, this black, white, and gray painting is due this Friday by the end of the day. And when I say day, I mean like midnight. I'm not staying up until 1 a.m. to grade your picture. So, but yeah, kind of, midnight, end of the day, Friday, I'll grade them on Friday, or on Saturday, excuse me. Questions, thoughts, worries, anything like that? Yeah, go for it.
What?
Hey. Oh. Hey. Can you hear me? I think I can hear you.
Okay, I was just so for the discussion boards, I know those are our attendance, and I messed up and I submitted mine a little late. But will you still go back on those and give us critiques?
Hold on.
Let's see.
Hold on. What you say?
Oh. Hello, I got a whole bunch of.
He said what?
Talking. He said what? Come on now, where are you at?
Does he want?
All right. Okay, going back. All right, so discussions, yes. I'm more than happy to talk about your picture, yeah. Um, yeah. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. Okay. Did you submit to, you submitted to week 2?
I submitted to week 2, and then I went ahead and submitted for this week as well, so that I
Oh,
wouldn't
oh,
forget.
yours? Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've been talking about yours the entire class.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just joined. I was just to get on like a few minutes ago, so I can go back and watch the recording.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Literally, I just did. We talked about yours the entire class, and I just did a paint over version to kind of show you on your painting specifically to show you ways that you can kind of improve it along the way. Yeah.
Okay,
But
thank you
once
so
we're
much. I apologize.
no, no, you're fine. It happens. I understand. Once we wrap up with class today, give it a couple minutes to process, and then it should be up on the that Blackboard page. If you don't see it for some reason, let me know, and I can always download it and just post it on YouTube or something like that. But yeah, it should. That's basically what we talked about for the past hour. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns, issues, problems, worries, anything like that? Make sure you guys feel good. Like I said, your project is due at the end of the day, Friday. And otherwise, that's it for me, guys. Please make sure you spend some time. Get to work there. Like I said, start with the black and the white, and then add in that medium gray. But don't start with medium gray. Yeah, Kayla, go for it. You're good, Kayla. Go for it. Oh, there you go.
Okay, sorry. So this is my last question. I just wanted to make sure. So just like if we want to do it in like an easier way, would you recommend us doing the layers way, like the way that you do it, or just like do it the other way?
Okay, me personally, if you wanted to pick the simplest route, I would tell you to just do it all on one layer. I like using many layers because if I mess up, I find it easier to like erase. But if you feel comfortable just painting on top, like if you make a mistake, just switch your color, if you make a mistake painting black, just switch it to white and kind of air quotes erase by painting more on top. You know what I mean? If you can do that, I think that's gonna be your best bet.
Okay, thank you so.
Yeah, yeah. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Does that work?
Yeah, so just so that we're on the same page. Basically, the layers help with like mistakes and things like that. It's easier to go back like layer 1 because like I've used Photoshop before, and like sometimes Photoshop they have like the different layers of things. So it's easier to just go back to like one page and like remove something and do it like that. So I think I understand.
Yeah, yeah. You're pretty much spot on. Absolutely. Again, there isn't really an easier way because at the end of the day, everybody here in the class is painting black and white shapes. It really comes down to simply finding what works for you. And that's why for this first project, don't worry about perfection or anything like that. Just make sure you are going through the process. Paint only black, only white, and then add gray on top of it. As we go into the class, as we do more and more projects, we'll worry about perfection and making things extra. But for now, just go through the process, find what works for you, and don't be afraid. If you're painting with layers and you hate it, then paint on a single layer and see what that works. This is a really good project because they're all going to look a little scratchy and kind of goofy looking because it's only 3 values. This is a really good project to experiment on and find what works best for you. Yeah. Cool. All right, good questions, guys. Thank you very much. If you do have other questions, please hang out with me. Feel free to ask them. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and call it a day here. I want to give you guys some extra time to make sure that you have time devoted to finishing up that picture. Don't forget by the end of the week here on Friday to also do your discussion board and to do your project, obviously, is due this Friday. Next week, Wednesday, we'll go ahead and jump on into our next project. But again, I've already pre-recorded the lessons, so I want to encourage you, by all means, watch that video ahead of time. So if you finish this project, jump into the next one. And then on Wednesday, we'll help clarify some of the things you see in that video. Okay? If you guys have questions, hang out. Otherwise, have yourselves a great weekend. Have yourselves a good amount of time to work on the assignment. And if you do have questions, again, you can schedule an appointment with me on Blackboard, or you can just email me. That's the best way to get a hold of me. All right? Be well, guys. Thank you. Yep. Have a good weekend. Work on that project. Be well, everyone.
Professor Kozak, I did have one more question, if that's okay.
Sure, please go ahead. I'm going to pick up my kid is waking up from his nap, so I'm going to grab him while we're talking.
Okay, that's fine. I know we were kind of emailing back and forth about me contracting your class.
Yes.
And I know that you did mention that there needed to be a research aspect. So I just kind of wanted to know where you wanted me to go with that, because I do need to fill out the paperwork so that I can get you to sign it before I submit it to my director.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes, we can totally do that. So I saw your email. I just haven't had a chance to respond to it yet. Yes, let me do this. So first I'm going to kill the recording just so that way it's just you and